Okie doke. Right, I think we are going to go ahead and make a start. So, hello everybody. Welcome to another Fearless Community event. Today we have got an interactive workshop for you, hosted by the lovely Amy Rogers, who is one of our lovely community members. I'm sure for any of you that were here before kind of the reboot, as we were saying, Amy's been around for some time and has been a real key player in the community. So I'm sure some of you are already familiar with her. She's going to walk us through Notion, how to best use it and how it can be a designer's best friend and all the ways that it can help you. Before we start, just a little bit of housekeeping for you. Anybody as you're coming in, please pop yourself on mute just to avoid any feedback and to help with the audio quality. This session is being recorded and it will be sent out to all of the attendees afterwards. So whether you're watching live or the recording, you'll still have access and get some value for it. So don't panic if something pops up and you have to drop off for any reason. And lastly, we do just want to pay quick mention to obviously the awful situation that's unfolding at the moment in Ukraine. If you are part of the Fearless community, you would have seen a post that's gone out this morning with a link to the Red Cross and the Ukraine crisis appeal for anybody who wants to help. Obviously, there's absolutely no pressure whatsoever, but we would just like to say if anybody is able and would like to donate, we'd absolutely love to see your help coming in. I'm going to pop some links in the chat box now, one to a website that Amy actually alerted me to this morning of just different ways that you can help if you'd like to have an impact. I think at the moment we're all feeling quite helpless, so this might be something that can be the little drop in the ocean and the little part that you play towards helping everybody over there. Right. So let's crack on. Let's hand over to Amy, who is going to lead us through how to use Notion. Over to you, Amy.
Thank you very much. So yeah, hi, I'm Amy. I'm a Fearless community member. I am a product designer, and then also I am just absolutely nuts about Notion. So this is more of like a joy for me, as well as hopefully sharing stuff with you that you can use in your kind of day-to-day. So the format of this is that I have prepared a little Notion page that if Laura, if you could put the link in the chat so everybody can kind of click on and join in. It's a template, so you can duplicate it yourself or you can just watch along as I edit it on my screen. So in that way I will share my own screen. So before we dive in today, I just want to highlight a couple of different things. First of all, Notion is a tool that you build iteratively. So when I was talking about this in the community before, some people mentioned that they didn't know where to start or that they see all these beautiful, wonderful templates and it's kind of intimidating. But I just wanted to highlight this. It's very much a start small and build up. So the stuff we'll go through today isn't like a go away, you'll be done. It's just little tips and tricks that you can add to your learning and build over time. Another thing to point out is that it's okay to feel a bit lost at the beginning. Notion's such a big powerhouse tool, and I'm someone who's been using it since 2018. So I've kind of got all of these things built into my head already. It's okay to take your time and get used to it yourself. And then finally, and this is the thing I like about Notion, is that there's no pressure to get it perfect right away. It's so easy to chop and change and edit things that the best way to learn is to just dive in, just give it a go, which is hopefully what I'll equip you with a bit better today. So the way I wanted to prepare for this is I asked in the community if there was anything in particular that people there didn't like about Notion or struggled with. And I've pulled out some of those points and I want to start by talking about those. So today we'll cover from a design team perspective, how to organize your work a little bit better using the databases and views that Notion provides, how to create rich documentation in Notion. So bringing all of your design assets and bits and pieces together in one place to create a knowledge base for your team. Tips and tricks on organizing stuff in Notion. It can get quite big and messy. So I just want to give you some of the tips that I've used over my kind of career / lifetime. And then I'll also cover using Notion just as like a day-to-day organizing thing. I don't only use it as a professional, but in my personal life as well. So I'll just cover that briefly. After I've gone through the community suggestions, this is the thing that was mentioned in the talk, it's creating a portfolio in Notion. I've always said that it's a really great tool if you're just starting out as a designer and you need, or even if you're in your career as a designer and you need a way to quickly share the work you've done. I've always found Notion to be a really nice way of doing that, but we'll get to that later. So to start out, the first thing is I will cover databases in Notion. So one of the key things about Notion is that it's very easy to kind of collate all of your information in one place and then expand upon it. And you do that using a structure called databases. So if you are familiar with Notion, you might already know this view. It's kind of like a Kanban, where you have all of your tasks and you pass them along and you assign them statuses, priorities and stuff. And one of the questions we got in the community was, is there an alternative way to display this? Like, it's very familiar to a designer to have this kind of board, but it might not suit everybody's brains. And the thing about Notion is you can take a single set of data in a database and transform how it looks without affecting the data behind it. So here I've set up an example of a Kanban board, and there's me and this is my partner. I've just pulled him in so I have someone else to assign these things to. And each of us has a particular task, particular status. They have types, priorities, etc. So in a traditional Kanban, you can see who's doing what status it's at. But with Notion, if I move my little face there, you can start to, we're trying to think how best to say this. So if you had, say, like hundreds of tasks in here, which if you're in a larger design team, you might well do, it can get a bit like muddly. You can kind of lose the larger picture. So you can use Notion to not only filter down by each of these criteria. So say if I only wanted to be able to see my work, I'd assign to me, and it would only show me my tasks. Obviously, I've not added enough tasks in here for it to be useful to see the effect of filtering, but just being able to do this and show only your work is quite handy. The other thing Notion will let you do is, if I clear the filter a second, and then come back up here and into subgroups. So this is a feature that Notion's added quite recently, where you can not only have everybody in one block, but then kind of split your board into several smaller boards. So say I wanted to see for each person what they were up to, you could filter it this way. So you can see all of Chris's stuff would be on the top row, then it would be all of my stuff. You can also filter by type. So say if you had this board for your whole design team and you wanted to see, okay, what research tasks have we got going on at the moment? What UX specific tasks? You can filter it this way as well. I don't know if we want to take questions as we go, or if it'd be better to leave them to the end. Let's just have a look.
There's nothing in the chat at the moment, but if anybody has got a question at this point they want to jump in with, please feel free to just add your questions into the chat box as we go. And Amy, as you kind of find these natural pauses, we can go into the chat and just double check if anything's in there at the moment.
Yep. Yeah, like I might keep saying the same point, but Notion is massive and there's so much that even I don't know. But like the purpose of the session here today is to take things that are particularly bothering you and for me to kind of use my expertise to filter it down into something that's maybe quite helpful. Okay, subgrouping is good. Yes, it's a feature that when I first saw it, I was like, oh gosh, okay, that's complicated, but it's actually super, super helpful. And then also on the question of if there's a way that you can view stuff that isn't just in a simple Kanban. So as you can see up here for this database that I've called Fearless Tasks, there's a add a view button, and Notion will provide you with several different views of the same set of information. So let's say, for example, that I don't like the way that information is displayed in columns and all these groupings, it gets kind of complicated. I just want a list of things that I need to do, ordered by how important they are. So for that, you can use the view type of list, just create the list. And this starts out by showing you everything. But like I showed you before, you can use filters to add a filter where the person that task is assigned to is me. And it would show me only my stuff. And if you wanted to then add on the priority label that you could see in the table before, you can toggle on and off like the kinds of information you show at this level, but it doesn't affect the underlying data. So nobody else would be able to like see this view. It'd just be for you. And that's one thing I really like about Notion in this sense, is that you can customize your own individual perspective. Actually, one way of showing that, I was going to save this for later, but I think it's relevant to bring it up now. So say you had, as an individual in like a larger group who was using Notion, a page that was just for you. So this is where you keep all of your important links. If you had any, I don't know, contact information for people you were talking to, you could put it in here. But you also wanted to be able to know what tasks you were working on. Like going back to that view I showed you before with the list of all of the stuff that's just for you. And you can use in Notion something called linked databases, which is where you pull in the information from another database into the page you're looking at. So I'll show you that now. You slash to bring up the kind of blocks menu. I don't know if there's a proper name for it, but the list of all the things you can add into Notion, you bring that up using a // and then you start to type in linked database. And here the option for create linked database, as you can see, it's add an existing database to this page. So rather than recreating the data, you're just pulling it straight in. And here, I can't remember what I call it now, fearless tasks, I think it was, yep, fearless tasks. And this will pull in all that data from that master database into here. And then here you can do as you did before, like create the list, then apply the filter so that it only shows me things that are assigned to me. And there you go. So you'd be able to, in whatever page you were looking at, in whatever format was most comfortable for you there, pull in tasks from your wider group or organization's database into your own little custom view. Yep, so that's just a little bit about the topic of being able to change how you see the way things are organized, like rather than just sticking with the traditional Kanban view. If there's any other questions on that, feel free to leave them in the chat. I'll come back to them. Otherwise, I can move on to the next step. Can filters be saved? So filters saved by default. So if I go back to that databases view from before and look at the list view that I made previously, the filters are automatically saved. So if I close Notion and come back in, it defaults to this. If you wanted two lists that each had a different filter, you would create a different view for it. So you could call this list, for example, like my list. And then if you wanted a list that just showed Chris's work, you could call it Chris's list. And then again, like set it up with all the different filters. Like once you've done the work once, you don't need to do it again. And then you can go back and toggle between these different views, which is quite handy. Yep, okay. So for now, just to keep things moving, I'll go to the next step, but if there's any questions, just put them in the chat. So the next question from the community was, so I have some things like our design system is stored in Figma, and then we've got some things in Google Drive, and then we've got some things in Notion. Like, how do you bring all of that together? So the thing about creating things in those places is that that's where they're best made. And by that, I mean, if you're creating design specifications in Figma and then using those design elements in your Figma designs, it makes sense to keep those in Figma. But then specifying them in Notion one thing that I found that you can use quite easily to do this is embedding. So Notion is very handy at bringing content in from other tools. That's like one of its USPs. So here I've prepared a list of links from other tools that I feel like a designer is most likely to use. Notion has all sorts of other embeddables that you can go through in your own time and explore, but just for this talk, I've pulled in these 4. So Figma, design tool. Loom is kind of like a video sharing platform where you can record short videos and share them with your teammates. Whimsical is creating flow diagrams and wireframes, all sorts of bits and pieces in there. And then Miro is like the mind mapping tool. And you can embed all of these directly into Notion. This is something that you can go through again in your own time and see how this works, but I'll just do Figma as an example. So you take the link of whatever it is you want to embed and just paste it in and embed. And what that will do is that will create a view directly in Notion that replicates whatever's in the tool you've copied from. So this is, I just pulled this up as an example. It's a design file that I've been working on in Figma. And if I wanted to embed this so people could see it without me having to export all the individual images and then bring them into Notion, or if I went in and updated this, I wouldn't have to re-export everything and bring it back in. If you embed something directly in Notion, it will be live all the time. As well, from here, you can directly open the Figma file itself by clicking on the link down here. So if someone did want to explore further, they could, but then if they also just wanted a snapshot, they could get that without moving anywhere. There are templates, and I'll mention them later on again, that I think it's the Headspace design system built in Notion. They've made quite a nice example of this, showing how they've brought their design elements that they have in Figma into a database in Notion. It's just something I wanted to mention, of that you don't have to change your workflow. You just need to make sure that for everything you create, if you pull it back into the central database, then that becomes the source of truth. It shouldn't be a case of, okay, so we have to reformat everything in Figma before we bring it in. No, you could just embed it directly. Similarly, if you had a Loom video of you explaining how a particular component works or something like that, again, you could embed that here next to the Figma. So you could have a video of you going through your Figma next to the live file, and someone could go along with. It's down to how you already communicate within your team, and even to yourself in your portfolio, for example, and how you arrange that data next to each other. But yeah, it's just something else I wanted to cover. It just came up in the community. Are there any questions about bringing things from other tools into Notion and then using that as a source of truth? Give me a chance to have a drink. Oh, okay. So I'll go on to, let me just check how we're doing for time. I don't want to do too much. Okay, good. So next I'll go on to organizing and finding things quickly. So like I said, Notion can get very big and bloaty. If you don't name things properly or keep your hierarchies and stuff. And I totally get that. There's a lot of stuff in my Notion, and it is kind of overwhelming sometimes, honestly. But there's 2 things that I have found very useful to be able to find stuff super quickly. The first is favorites. So as you can see up here in the top right, there's a little star, and I've selected it, which means that this page, the Notion for Designers page, is currently in my favorites. So if I expanded my sidebar on the left here, you can see Notion for Designers is right at the top. And I've added a couple of other ones here. These are pages that I access quite frequently, so it makes sense to put them in my favorites. All my other stuff is in private, and you can hide and show things by clicking on headers. So this is quite good, particularly if you're working in a larger organization. You have a lot of shared pages. It can get quite messy. So I found just being diligent about which pages you favorite, is a good way to keep an eye on the most important stuff. Another thing you can do, like Notion has a search function. This has come along quite a way. It used to be quite, quite difficult to use, but now, like if I wanted to find that database we were using before called Fearless Tasks, if I can spell it properly, it should come up. Come on. There you go. And it means that you can quickly jump between different sections in your Notion, no matter how big and messy it is. See, if I just wanted to get back to that page we were on before, use the favorites. And then we've already covered linked databases as well. So the other, Alan, how often do you cleanse those favorites? So you can see here, I've got, I might as well show this. I have a weekly log. This is just my personal organization database, I guess. And each week I'll create a new page. So every week I will come in and clean my favorites, remove week 7 from my old one, and put in my new one. Yeah, so it's about as frequently as you need to be. It's about as frequently as you need it. I found that as long as you just keep the most important things in focus, then the rest is pretty easy to find with that search function. So for example, at the end of today, once I've done this talk, I'll probably remove this from my favorites. I don't feel like I'll need to see this every day anymore. The other thing to cover is using Notion to organize your day-to-day life. So as you just saw, I use Notion for my day-to-day stuff as well. And I wanted to show you this page as an example of a really simple view you can use. So this is the one that I've made for our home here, me and my partner to use. Obviously I use it a lot more than he does, but it's good to have a central place that we can both go to say, okay, what do we need to do this week? What are we going to have for dinner? Is there anything that we're missing that when we next do a larger shop, we can bring up this Notion page and kind of tick off all the stuff that we know we're missing. In here as well, you can see you can add in little time reminders, and then Notion will, if I've set this up properly, no, maybe not. This is why you never do things live. You always check before you go. But basically, you can, with Notion, create notifications for a specific time by using the @ symbol. And it will send you a push notification. I think you can do it to your phone or as an email. So if you had a deadline, you could just go @tomorrow and it would ping you. You can also tag people. So here, if I wanted to remind Chris, oh, Amy's going to be speaking at 1, don't have anything on in the background. I would assign it to him and then he'd get a notification, however he'd set it up on his phone. Yep, so that's just an example of how you can use Notion for like a personal dashboard. Do you have any advice for people who use other productivity tools? Sometimes it feels like I get added effort to update both. And yeah, so for me, like Google Calendar is a really good one to bring up because famously, like Google Calendar is like one of the main event keeping tools, I guess you'd say. And then Notion, it just, for whatever reason, it's really hard to make them communicate. So see if I can find the page where I had that before. Yeah, you can see I've tried to do that here. So I have an automation running, and that's probably a good topic for, maybe discussion today or at a different time if people are interested, where you can, if you book in an event on Google Calendar, I use automate.io, but there's a few other tools available, like Zapier, I think is one. So when you create an event in Google Calendar, it can set up an automation to then put it into a database in Notion. So this event here, you can see it's tagged as Google Calendar, which means that I've made this in my Google Calendar and then it's pulled it into Notion. Yeah, it's one of those things where, again, it depends on how you work. For me, I'm fine to have Google Calendar still like on my phone. Like I have multiple calendars, and trying to juggle that with automations in Notion, I've tried it and it's just a little bit of a headache. But it's about learning where Notion fits in for you. It could be that you do it this way. It could be that you just put a link to your Google Calendar on whatever page you're on. Yeah, there's no easy answer. I think there are tools that will do that for you, but I've not used any of them really enough to recommend one. I can look into it, but yeah, sorry, I can't be more helpful about that. Hi, Pylon. Nice to see you again as well. I want to use Notion more often for my business. Yeah, Google Calendar. I just spoke about that one. It's yeah, it's a bit rubbish. Yeah, like I said, automations kind of might be helpful in some situations, but it's also like, yeah, it's a tricky one. I would recommend looking at tools that can do that for you. Is there any max data feature limitations you find in using Notion? So Notion, let's see if I can find it. Their free package for me for the longest time was, in plans, was absolutely fine. There's unlimited blocks. So there's no limit to how many pages or databases or anything you can make. I think the only limitation, and they might have removed this, is on the timeline view for databases. But I think for 99% of people and cases, you won't need more than, I think the limit's 5. They might have changed that anyway. So there's no limit on pages for the free plan. You can have guests on, even if you have the free plan, which is quite cool. The only thing that limited me, which is why I now currently use the personal pro plan, is file upload size limits. So if you have like a larger PDF or a very large high-res image or something, or a video, you won't be able to put it directly into Notion. You'll have to like link to it from externally. But for most cases, I didn't really have a problem with that. Yep. And then how would you compare this to Trello, etc.? So Trello for me is very like, it's kind of similar to that Kanban view you were looking at before, in that Trello is largely, from what I've experienced anyway, like moving stuff along the pipeline. You can add details to a particular task. It's the same thing with Notion. Yeah, I think if you are looking just for a Kanban board, like Trello is fine. If you're looking for a Kanban board that you can transform into a list and then share that list with other people, or to create like different views, or to pipe that data into other databases and do calculation, like I said, there's so much Notion can do that I probably won't cover today. Then Notion, I would say, is a little bit better for that kind of thing. Yeah, cool. I think I've covered that off very nicely. Yep, and then I've covered organizing Daytoday. So yeah, there's so much that I won't be able to cover today. For further reading, I guess, and maybe even future talks, if people are particularly interested, automations is a really good place to look. So being able to pull stuff in automatically from other tools into Notion, and then also pushing stuff from Notion into other tools. Like I was playing just before this talk with pushing Notion into Slack. Like that's something I know you can do. Or emailing as well, emailing people if something changes in Notion. Like there's all sorts of bits and pieces in there to play with. But going back to what I was saying before, if you don't need to know that to start using Notion, like that all comes later when you find that you need them. It's okay to ignore all that for now. And the other thing, if you're looking for something more complicated, and I don't really have an example to hand to show, I can chat about this in the Slack later today if it's something people are interested in, is Rollups. So what that means is, like I mentioned just then, you take data from one database, pipe it into another, and then do calculations on it. It's quite complicated. But say, for example, you had, say you had like a table that had all of your individual sales in it, and then you had another table that had like quarterly roundups or something, and then one of the fields in that was sales value for this year. You could pull in all the sales you made from that table into this one and add them up. But yeah, it's a super powerful thing that we don't need to go into today. Sorry, I've waffled. I do that a lot when I talk about these kinds of things. So we've got about half an hour left, but I will try and keep it shorter than that to leave time for extra questions. Just wanted to cover this of creating a portfolio with Notion. So as a designer, like your portfolio website is something that's kind of essential at this point. It's in terms of getting new work, getting a job, being able to showcase what you've done before is important. But one thing you see quite often, particularly as a new designer making their portfolio for the first time, is, well, what do I use? Do I need like a Squarespace? Do I need like I don't know, do I need to build one? Like, you know, it costs money, it takes a lot of time, like you have to, you know, tools like Squarespace will, you know, get you sucked in with the theming and animations and all these things you don't really need. All the portfolio needs is to be navigable. So for someone looking at it to be able to know where all your work's going to be, how to navigate it, needs to be readable. So readable, that's kind of self-explanatory actually, just so that you can see it and read it and understand it. And then responsive and device agnostic, so making it so you can see it no matter what you're looking at it on, like whether that's on a computer or a phone or a tablet. That's an important point for a portfolio. And yeah, it doesn't need any of this other stuff like parallax scrolling. Like I don't want to see another portfolio with parallax scrolling, if I'm honest, but it's a debate for another time. So one thing that I like about Notion as well is, as you can see here, it's quite easy to lay out information very clearly and succinctly. And just because of the way the Notion team have designed it, it just looks nice and clear. One thing I've included in this site, which if you've opened it, you'll see already, is a template. So this is something that my own design portfolio until quite recently looked like this. Just like a snippet at the top and then one of these databases with case studies typed out in them. So if I open this one, it's quite easy to scroll through and read, like say this was a full case study, you can go in, scan along. If I wanted to embed, have I still got the link in here? Yes, I do. So if I wanted to embed the Figma file for a particular prototype I was using, or a particular user flow or something, I could do that directly in the case study itself, which I think is quite important in a portfolio anyway. And then what's the other thing? Yes, I was going to cover as well. So this is something that I get asked quite a lot is, okay, so I've built my portfolio in Notion, like how do I share it with people? Like Notion links, when you look at them, can get a little bit scary. And there are some places like Slack where you can disguise the link and make it not quite so hideous. But like if you're just typing out your portfolio website address to someone, you don't want to have to type all of this. So one thing you can do in Notion is you can set this as your homepage. So in settings, then workspace settings. I've already set it here, but I'll clear it just to show you. So there's a field in here called public homepage. And you can set any page in Notion that's publicly shared to be the site that people see when they go to amyrogers.notion.site. So if I set that page that I was looking at before as my homepage and click update. So now, I don't know how to get it while I'm showing my screen, but if you were to go to, where is it? amyrogers.notion.site. Yep, then it will show you this page just baked into Notion. So in that way, you can just send that link out. You could put it as your personal website link if you need to build a website quickly and for free. Like we were looking at the pricing before, it's totally free to do this. I think this is just like a really quick, nice way to, as a designer, create a professional looking space online super quickly without paying any money and without getting too bogged into the design of it. I suppose another thing to mention on that point is there are loads of sites that have been built using Notion as a kind of back end. And I've provided a couple of links to the two that I've used most frequently here. The first is Super. So Super is a platform that turns Notion pages into full-on websites. Super has a paid option that will also let you use things like custom domains or CSS to edit the visual of your website, which is, if again look at my portfolio, that's kind of what I've done. I mean, as a junior or as someone starting out, I wouldn't say you need this, but it's also once you get a bit more confident and it's something that you would like, and if you're happy to pay for it, that's the option. But Super is also a really good resource for just inspiration for websites that have been built with Notion as a backend. And then the other one is Fruition. Again, it's just another platform showcasing portfolios and other websites built in Notion. I think that's all I wanted to cover from that perspective as well. I just want to go through a list of resources here that I think are going to be helpful if you do want to take this away and carry on and learn a bit more yourself. First is the Notion 101 playlist. So this is quite a new thing. I haven't watched most of them myself, but they're from the Notion team and they are just super good at producing helpful tutorials and content. So I recommend, if you want to learn more about the basics, you can go right here. Notion customer stories. These are very, very cool if you are someone, for example, either leading a product team or within a product team in a company, and you want to know a bit more about how you can structure your kind of company's database in Notion. There's loads of like high profile companies. I mentioned Headspace earlier. There's quite a few of that level in here. I found it super useful just for inspiration to go and have a click around and see how other people are doing it. It's just really cool. And then there's also, I've linked to a couple of, like, this isn't my first talk on Notion. I've linked to a couple of other ones I've done in here. The first one is specifically around building a portfolio in Notion. It's more around my story and why I did it, but I speak about a few helpful tips in there as well. And then productivity in Notion, that's a brown bag we did in the Fearless community. I think it was last year or the year before, just basically going through my personal Notion page at that time. And you'll see that it's different to what I have today. Going back to that point of like, Notion's ever changing and you learn new things and you get better at organizing your stuff. So if you want to, see a bit more about Notion from my perspective, you can go and check out either of those. If you have any other questions, you can reach me on LinkedIn or Twitter. I'm also, and we'll go there after this talk, always in the Slack channel for the Fearless community, and I'm always more than happy to answer questions. Unless there's anything I can go through right now, that's it from me. And thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Amy. That was absolutely awesome. And yeah, I have to say, completely agree with Alan that Notion should be giving you free premium access. You are obviously a champion. Where is that sponsorship at? I think we all as a community now need to start a campaign to get Amy a Notion sponsorship. I think she's very deserving of that. We've got a quick question here from Alan. How do you stay on top of the changes in Notion? I imagine that it develops quite quickly.
Yep. So particularly if you're in a big team, it's like this is like an overwhelming amount of notifications sometimes. In the updates, I think you can filter it to say only show me things for only show me notifications for stuff that I'm following. And I think you can do that up at the top here. Gosh, where is it? Maybe it's not here. I'm not the best person to ask this question, clearly. But basically, in the same way that you can filter down any notifications in Notion, you can kind of limit what you're looking at. I can post it in the Slack channel afterwards if I find it. And there's also, like I showed you with favorites, you can just keep an eye on the stuff that matters to you. Sorry, I can't be more helpful on that one. And then, is there a way to increase loading performance on Notion sites? Yeah, so that's a good question. Obviously, I'm not like qualified enough to answer that from a technical perspective, but I think if you are concerned about loading times, I think using Notion links directly rather than putting it through a site like Super will probably help if you're not too fussed about the aesthetic or custom domains or anything like that. I think another thing is to just try and reduce the amount of content you're loading up front. Maybe that might help, but yeah, I don't know if you think I'm like qualified enough to comment on load times and things. I know as well with Notion, like there was an issue with SEO. Like if you're someone who relies on SEO for, you know, traffic to your website through search engines and stuff, I think using sites like Super can help. I think they have tools in there for adding keywords and things like that. Basic Notion, again, I don't know too much enough about that to comment on it. But yeah, I think, yeah, it's not ideal. Yep, I think that's covered it for now. Yep, thanks, Laura. Yeah, there is a page history up here, so you can probably see all the editing I've been doing on this page. But yep, you can go back and see previous versions if you need to.
Awesome. Right, I don't think any more questions have come in to the Zoom chat. So what we do is I've just popped a link in there as well for anybody who isn't already part of the Fearless community. I recognise a lot of names in here, so I think the majority of you are, but just in case anybody hasn't, the link to join the Fearless community is there, where you will have access to wonderfully talented and helpful people like Amy, who are so happy to share their wisdom with you. So if you haven't already, please sign up and I will let you into the community. Amy has said she's more than happy to carry this on over in Slack if anybody has got any questions that they've not popped into the chat box here, or even if you don't think of anything immediately, but perhaps when you're having a little play around on Notion, then please do always reach out to Amy as well. I would ask, from a selfish point of view, if you could pop those questions into channel 2 community questions, just so other people can see the question and answer as well. It might help other people rather than Amy being bombarded directly. That would be great. So I would just like to say a huge thank you to Amy. Super insightful as always. Can't believe I never thought of using Notion to organise home life. I'm ready to get like the whole Baxter family organised now with a Notion page so everyone knows what they're doing, when and where. It makes complete sense. And I think you're right, it's really useful to see it as a portfolio builder tool as well, especially like you say for somebody who's potentially not got the time or the finances to invest in, you know, an all singing, all dancing website. And like you say, it's not necessary, is it? You just kind of need to show your case studies, your work, your thought process. That's what's most important, and actually stripping it back is sometimes the best way to kind of show all of that off. So super useful and insightful. So everybody, thank you so much for attending today. It's lovely to see you all. Make sure that you check out the Fearless Eventbrite page, as you'll see our next events that we have coming up. Our next one is Transitioning to Management with Ian Oliver from Netflix. So going to be an absolutely incredible talk about the toolkit that you need on how to successfully manage and how your value add to a business changes when you go from being an IC to a manager. So anybody interested in that, please do go and sign up. And until then, we will see you in the community. See you later, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.